The auctioneer's gavel struck the wooden podium 3 times, and Emma Clarke felt each blow like a hammer against her heart as strangers picked through her life, item by item, in the dusty town square of Redemption, Texas, on a scorching June afternoon in 1882. She stood beneath the mercantile's awning, her calico dress faded from too many washings, watching as her mother's china teapot was held aloft for inspection. The auctioneer, a barrel-chested man named Hutchins, called out in his booming voice, "Fine English porcelain, ladies and gentlemen. Who'll start the bidding at $2? Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her shawl, though the temperature had already climbed past 90 degrees. Her father had been dead 3 months, killed when his horse threw him during a storm, and the debts he had left behind were suffocating. The bank had given her 30 days to settle accounts, and when she could not, they had seized everything. A tall figure moved through the crowd, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Emma noticed him because he was different from the usual townspeople, a cowboy with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore a black hat pulled low, leather chaps over worn denim, and a blue shirt that had seen better days. A bandana hung loose around his neck, and a gun belt sat comfortable on his hips. He stopped near the front of the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the items displayed on makeshift tables, remnants of the life Emma had known. $2, someone called out. The teapot passed to a woman Emma recognized from church, someone who had smiled at her last Sunday with pity in her eyes. Emma looked away, unable to watch anymore. Her father's books came next, leather-bound volumes he had treasured, then the quilts her grandmother had stitched, the oil lamps that had lit their evenings, the carved wooden chairs from their dining table. Each item carried a memory, and each memory was being sold to the highest bidder. The cowboy raised his hand. $5 for the lot of books. His voice was deep, steady, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Hutchins looked surprised but pleased. Sold to the gentleman in the black hat. The pattern continued. When her father's saddle was brought out, hand-tooled leather with silver conchos, the cowboy bid $20 and won it before anyone else could counter. He bought the quilts, the lamps, the chairs. He bought her mother's sewing basket and the kitchen table. He bought the iron cookstove and the wash basin and the mirror that had hung in the front hallway. Emma's confusion grew with each purchase. She did not know this man, had never seen him in Redemption before, yet he was spending a fortune on her belongings. The crowd noticed too, whispers spreading like wildfire. Who is he? Why is he buying everything? Must be sweet on her. That last comment made Emma's cheeks burn. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never emerge, but she forced herself to stay and witness the dismantling of her world. By the time the auction ended, the sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The cowboy had purchased nearly everything except a few items that had gone to early bidders. Hutchins counted the money, nodded with satisfaction, and announced that the debt was settled with a small surplus. He handed Emma an envelope. $43 remaining, Miss Clarke. Your father's accounts are cleared. His tone was businesslike, devoid of compassion. Emma took the envelope with numb fingers, staring at it as though it might vanish. The crowd dispersed, people loading their purchases onto wagons and heading home. Emma stood alone in the square, surrounded by empty tables and trampled grass. She did not know what to do next, where to go. The house had been sold too, not at auction but directly to the bank, and she had until sunset to vacate. Her few remaining possessions, mainly clothes and personal items, were packed in a single trunk at the boarding house where she had spent the last week. Miss Clarke. The voice startled her. She turned to find the cowboy standing a respectful distance away, his hat now in his hands. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with a strong jaw and a scar that traced a thin white line along his left cheekbone. His eyes, those remarkable blue eyes, held a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. My name is James Cordell. I wonder if you might spare me a few minutes of your time. Emma's throat felt tight. You bought my things, Mr. Cordell, all of them. I do not understand why. Her voice came out stronger than she felt, tinged with the pride that had kept her upright through these terrible months. James shifted his weight, seeming uncomfortable. Could we talk somewhere more private, perhaps the hotel dining room? I promise I mean you no disrespect. Emma hesitated. Propriety dictated she should refuse, but propriety had not saved her home or her belongings. She nodded slowly. Very well. The hotel dining room was nearly empty, just a few travelers eating an early supper. James led her to a corner table, pulled out her chair before seating himself across from her. He ordered coffee for them both, though Emma doubted she could swallow anything past the lump in her throat. When the waitress left, James leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. I knew your father, Miss Clarke. Not well, but we met several years ago when I was driving cattle through this territory. My horse had gone lame and your father helped me, would not take payment for his trouble. He invited me to supper at your home, and your family treated me like I was someone who mattered, not just a drifter passing through. Emma searched her memory but could not recall the occasion. So many people had passed through their lives, her father generous to a fault. That sounds like something my father would do, she said quietly. James nodded. He was a good man. I heard about his passing when I came through Abilene last month, heard about the debts too and the auction. I figured I owed him a debt of my own, a debt of kindness. He paused, his fingers drumming once against the table, so I came here to settle it. By buying everything I own, Emma's voice rose slightly. Mr. Cordell, I do not need your charity. James met her gaze steadily. It is not charity, Miss Clarke, it is repayment, and I am not finished. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I bought your belongings, yes, but I bought them for you. I want to return everything. Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. Return them? I do not understand. Why would you spend all that money just to give them back? Because they are yours, James said simply. They hold your memories, your history. They should not be scattered to strangers. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried publicly through any of this and would not start now. That is very kind, Mr. Cordell, but I have nowhere to put them. The house is gone. I am staying at the boarding house, one room, and tomorrow I will have to find work somewhere, perhaps as a seamstress or a teacher if anyone will hire me. James was quiet for a moment, considering. I have a proposition for you, Miss Clarke, and I ask that you hear me out before you refuse. Emma's spine stiffened. She had heard about propositions from men, the kind that ruined reputations. I am listening, she said carefully. James must have sensed her wariness because he quickly continued. I own a ranch about 15 miles north of here, near the Brazos River. It is not large, but it is mine, bought with money I saved from 10 years of cattle drives. I have a house, small but sturdy, and I have been looking for someone to help manage the household. I am often out with the herd and I need someone I can trust to keep things running. I would like to offer you that position. You want me to work for you, Emma said slowly. James nodded. Room and board plus wages, $30 a month. You would have your own room, complete privacy, and I would bring all your belongings to the ranch. You could arrange them however you like, make it feel like home. It was a generous offer, almost too generous. Emma studied his face, looking for hidden motives, but saw only earnestness. Why would you do this for me, Mr. Cordell? You do not know me. James smiled slightly, the first time his stern features had softened. Your father did not know me either when he helped me. Sometimes kindness does not need a reason. Emma felt something shift inside her, a tiny loosening of the despair that had gripped her for months. This could be a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, but she was also cautious. Would there be anyone else at the ranch, other workers? James nodded. I have 2 ranch hands, Miguel and his son Carlos. They live in the bunkhouse. Miguel's wife passed away 2 years ago and Carlos is 15, a good kid. They will treat you with respect, I will make certain of that. And Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch comes by once a week to bring supplies and check on things. You will not be isolated or vulnerable." The reassurance helped. Emma took a deep breath. "I would want to be very clear about expectations, Mr. Cordell. I will keep house, cook, manage supplies, but I am not interested in any arrangement beyond employment." Her cheeks flushed as she said it, but it needed to be stated plainly. James's expression remained serious. "You have my word, Miss Clarke. I am offering you a job, nothing more. I respect you far too much to suggest otherwise." The sincerity in his voice convinced her. Emma nodded slowly. "Then I accept. When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning, if that suits you," James said. "I will rent a wagon, load your things, and we can head to the ranch by midday." "It is about a 3-hour drive." Emma agreed, and they finished their coffee while James described the ranch, the house, the land. He spoke with quiet passion about his plans to expand the herd to build something lasting. Emma found herself relaxing slightly, drawn into his vision. When they parted at the hotel entrance, James tipped his hat to her. "Thank you for trusting me, Miss Clarke. I will not disappoint you." That night, Emma lay awake in her narrow boarding house bed, wondering if she had made the right decision. She knew nothing about James Cordell beyond the fact that he had known her father and had shown her extraordinary kindness. But what choice did she have? The $43 in her envelope would last a few weeks at most, and then she would be destitute. At least this way she had a position, a roof over her head, and her belongings returned to her. It felt like a miracle, and Emma had stopped believing in those months ago. Morning came bright and clear. Emma dressed in her best surviving dress, a green cotton that brought out her eyes, and packed her trunk. James arrived promptly at 9 with a sturdy wagon and a team of horses. He loaded her trunk himself, then helped her onto the bench seat with a steady hand. They stopped by the auction house where Hutchins had stored the purchased items overnight. It took 2 hours to load everything, James working tirelessly despite the climbing heat. Emma tried to help, but he waved her off. "You just rest, Miss Clarke. You have been through enough." By noon, they were on the road heading north, the wagon heavy with Emma's reclaimed life. The landscape rolled by endless stretches of grassland dotted with mesquite and live oak. The sky was a brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds. James drove with easy competence, one hand on the reins, his body swaying with the wagon's rhythm. Emma sat beside him, acutely aware of his presence, the breadth of his shoulders, the capable way he handled the horses. She tried to focus on the scenery instead. "Tell me about the ranch," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence. James glanced at her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Well, I have about 500 acres, mostly grazing land. I run about 200 head of cattle right now, longhorns mostly, tough as nails. Miguel and Carlos help with the day-to-day work, mending fences, moving the herd, that sort of thing. The house is adobe, keeps cool in summer and warm in winter. It has 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a front room. There is a well with good water and a barn for the horses. It is not fancy, but it is solid." "It sounds wonderful," Emma said honestly. Compared to the uncertainty she had faced yesterday, it sounded like paradise. James seemed pleased by her response. "I hope you will think so when you see it. I have not had much time for niceties, I am afraid. The house is clean but sparse. You will probably want to add a woman's touch." Emma smiled at that. "I will do my best." They rode on, the conversation flowing more easily now. James told her about his childhood in Missouri, how his parents had died of fever when he was 16, how he had headed west with nothing but a horse and a dream. He had worked cattle drives, saving every penny, learning the trade. 5 years ago, he had finally bought his land and started building his ranch. Emma shared her own story, growing up in Redemption, her mother's death from consumption when Emma was 12, how her father had raised her alone, teaching her to read and cipher, encouraging her education when most men would have kept a daughter ignorant. "He wanted me to have choices," Emma said softly. "He always said a woman with learning could make her own way in the world." James nodded. "He was right, and you still can. This is just a starting point. His faith in her was unexpected and oddly touching. They reached the ranch in early afternoon. Emma's first glimpse of it took her breath away. The house sat on a low rise, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided shade. It was indeed adobe, the walls thick and sturdy, painted white with blue shutters. A wide porch stretched across the front, and Emma could imagine sitting there in the evenings, watching the sunset. Behind the house stood a barn, a corral, and a smaller structure that must be the bunkhouse. The land rolled away in all directions, golden grass swaying in the breeze. "Welcome home," James said quietly. Emma looked at him, startled by his word choice. Home. She had not had one of those in months. "It is beautiful," she whispered. James helped her down from the wagon, and a moment later 2 figures emerged from the barn. Miguel was a stocky man with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years in the sun. Carlos was lanky, all arms and legs, with his father's dark eyes and a shy smile. James made introductions, explaining that Emma would be managing the household. Miguel nodded approvingly. "It is good to have someone here. James works too hard, never stops to eat properly." Emma laughed, some of her nervousness fading. "Well, we will have to fix that." James and Miguel began unloading the wagon while Carlos showed Emma through the house. It was indeed sparse but clean, the floors swept, the windows letting in plenty of light. The kitchen had a good stove, a sturdy table, shelves for supplies. Her bedroom was the largest of the 3, with a window overlooking the front porch and enough space for all her furniture. "Mr. Cordell said to give you the best room," Carlos said. "He moved his things to the smaller one last week." Emma felt a rush of gratitude. James had given up his own room for her comfort. She helped direct the unloading, telling the men where to place each item. Her mother's china went on the kitchen shelves, the quilts on her bed, the books on a shelf James built into the front room. The chairs surrounded the kitchen table, and her father's saddle hung in the barn, a place of honor. By evening, the house had transformed. It looked lived in, warm, like a real home. Emma stood in the kitchen, surveying her domain, and felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. James insisted she rest while he and Miguel prepared supper, a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and bacon. They ate together on the porch, the 4 of them, watching the sky turn colors as the sun set. Carlos talked about the new foal in the barn, Miguel shared news from the neighboring ranches, and James listened more than he spoke, his gaze occasionally drifting to Emma. She found herself hyper-aware of him, the way he moved, the deep timbre of his laugh. She pushed the feelings aside. This was her employer, nothing more. The days fell into a rhythm. Emma rose early, made breakfast for the men before they headed out to work. She spent her days cleaning, cooking, mending clothes, managing the endless tasks that kept a household running. It was hard work, but satisfying. She baked bread, tended a small vegetable garden behind the house, made preserves from wild plums Carlos picked. In the evenings, after supper, James would often sit on the porch with her, talking about the day, the ranch, their plans. Miguel and Carlos usually retired to the bunkhouse, leaving Emma and James alone in the gathering darkness. Emma began to know James beyond the kind stranger who had saved her belongings. She learned he was patient and hardworking, that he cared deeply for his land and his animals. He was gentle with the horses, fair with his workers, and unfailingly respectful toward her. He made her laugh with stories from his cattle drive days, wild tales of stampedes and river crossings and ornery bulls. He listened when she talked about her father, her memories, her grief. He did not try to fix her pain, just acknowledged it, and that meant more than any platitudes could have. Weeks passed. Summer deepened into July, the heat relentless. Emma and James settled into their shared life with surprising ease. She found herself looking forward to his return each evening, the way his face lit up when he saw supper waiting, the way he always thanked her for her work. Small gestures became meaningful. He brought her wildflowers from the pasture. She mended his favorite shirt with extra care. They began sitting closer on the porch, their conversations stretching later into the night. One evening in late July, a storm rolled in, lightning splitting the sky. Emma stood on the porch watching the display, thrilled by the raw power of nature. James came to stand beside her, so close their shoulders nearly touched. "You are not afraid of storms," he observed. Emma shook her head. "My father died in one, but I cannot blame the weather for that." "I think they are beautiful in their way." James was quiet for a moment. "You are remarkable, Emma Clarke. You have been through so much, yet you still find beauty in the world." It was the first time he had used her given name. Emma looked at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "James," she said softly, testing his name on her tongue. He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I like the way you say that." The air between them felt charged, electric as the storm. Emma knew they were crossing a line, moving from employer and employee to something else, something dangerous and wonderful. "We should go inside," she said, but she did not move, neither did James. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something. I did not bring you here just because I owed your father a debt. I brought you here because from the moment I saw you at that auction, looking so brave and lost, I knew I wanted to protect you, to know you. I have been half in love with you since that first day, and every day since has only made it worse." Emma's breath caught. She should stop this, should remind him of propriety and her position. Instead, she said, "Only half." James laughed, the sound startled out of him. "Fully then. Completely. Entirely in love with you." Emma reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I thought I was alone in this feeling. I thought I was foolish for caring so much, so quickly." James lifted their joined hands, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Not foolish, never foolish." The rain began then, a sudden downpour that sent them rushing inside, laughing and drenched. They stood in the kitchen, water dripping on the floor, staring at each other. James reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the drumming rain. Emma answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as James pulled her closer. Emma had been kissed before, clumsy attempts by boys at church socials, but this was different. This was consuming, a rightness that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Emma blinked. "What?" James pulled back slightly, his hands still cradling her face. "I know it is fast. I know you might think I am insane, but I do not want to waste time. I love you, Emma. I want to build a life with you, a real marriage, a partnership. Marry me?" Emma's mind raced. She had known this man for less than 2 months, yet she felt like she had known him forever. She thought of her father, of his kindness to strangers, of how one act of generosity had led to this moment. She thought of James, his steady presence, his gentleness, the way he looked at her like she was precious. "Yes," she said, the word coming out strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." James whooped, actually whooped, and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. Emma laughed, clutching his shoulders, feeling joy flood through her. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Redemption. Emma wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, now altered to fit her slender frame. James wore a new suit, looking uncomfortable but impossibly handsome. Miguel and Carlos stood as witnesses, along with Mrs. Henderson and half the town, who had heard about the cowboy who bought a woman's entire life and gave it back. The story had spread, become legend, and people looked at James and Emma with approval and a touch of awe. Emma spoke her vows clearly, meaning every word. James's voice shook slightly when he promised to love and cherish her, and Emma saw tears in his eyes. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her with such tenderness that Emma heard several women sigh. They held a simple reception at the ranch, tables set up under the cottonwoods, neighbors bringing food and well wishes. Emma moved through the gathering in a daze of happiness, James's hand always at her back, anchoring her. As evening fell and the guests departed, James led Emma into the house, their house now, truly. He had moved his things back into the larger bedroom, combining their belongings. Emma felt suddenly nervous, the reality of marriage settling over her. James seemed to sense it. "We do not have to rush anything," he said gently. "We have the rest of our lives." Emma looked at this man who had become her husband, this good man who had saved her when she had nothing, and felt her nervousness fade. "I love you, James Cordell," she said, "and I am not afraid." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, James patient and loving, making sure Emma felt safe and cherished. Afterward they lay tangled together, talking quietly in the darkness. "I cannot believe this is real," Emma whispered. "That a few months ago I had lost everything, and now I have you." James kissed her forehead. "You have always had me. From the moment I decided to come to that auction, I just had to convince you of it." Emma smiled against his chest. "You are very convincing." Life as James's wife was everything Emma had not known she wanted. The work was still hard, the Texas sun still brutal, but she faced it all with joy. She and James fell into a partnership that went beyond marriage. They worked together, planned together, dreamed together. James consulted her on ranch decisions, valued her opinions. Emma found herself learning about cattle and horses, even riding out with James on occasion to check the herd. Miguel and Carlos became like family, eating at their table most nights, sharing in their lives. Autumn brought cooler weather and a trip to Fort Worth to sell cattle. James insisted Emma come along, wanting to show her the city. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, walked along the bustling streets. James bought her a new dress, blue silk that made her eyes shine, and a pair of pearl earrings. "You do not need to buy me things," Emma protested, though she was delighted. "I want to," James said simply. "I want to give you the world." Emma kissed him right there on the street, not caring who saw. Winter was mild that year, a blessing in Texas. Emma and James spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud from her father's books, playing cards, talking about everything and nothing. James taught her to shoot, insisting she know how to protect herself when he was out on the range. Emma proved a quick study, her aim true. "You are full of surprises," James said admiringly after she hit 3 targets in a row. Emma grinned. "I had a good teacher." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calved, and Emma found herself helping with difficult births, holding lanterns for James while he worked to save mother and baby. It was messy, exhausting work, but deeply satisfying. She began to understand James's love for this life, the connection to the land and the animals. One afternoon, as she watched James work with a newborn calf, coaxing it to stand, she realized she was happy, truly deeply happy, perhaps for the first time since her mother had died. That night she told James as much. They were on the porch, their favorite spot, watching stars emerge. "I am happy too," James said, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible. You have made this house a home, Emma. You have made me complete." Emma nestled against him, breathing in his scent of leather and hay and sun. "We have made each other complete," she corrected. James chuckled. "Fair enough." In May, Emma realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, not wanting to hope too soon, then another. When she was certain, she pulled James aside after breakfast, her heart pounding. "I have news," she said. James looked at her expectantly. Emma took a breath. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." James's face went through several emotions, shock, disbelief, then pure elation. He grabbed her, lifted her, spun her carefully. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." Miguel and Carlos were nearly as excited when they heard. Miguel clapped James on the back, grinning broadly. "You will be a good father," he said. Carlos, shy as always, congratulated Emma quietly. Mrs. Henderson appeared the next day with baby clothes and advice. "You take care of yourself, Emma Cordell," she said sternly. "No heavy lifting, plenty of rest." Emma promised, though she had no intention of becoming an invalid. She continued her work, just more carefully, James hovering like an anxious mother hen. The summer passed in a haze of heat and anticipation. Emma's body changed, her belly swelling with their child. James was fascinated by it, constantly touching her stomach, talking to the baby. "Do you think it can hear me?" he asked one night. Emma laughed. "I hope so. You should tell it all about the ranch so it will be ready." James spent the next hour describing the cattle, the horses, the land, his voice soft and full of wonder. Emma fell asleep listening to him, feeling utterly content. In early September, on a cool morning that hinted at autumn's approach, Emma's pains began. James immediately panicked, rushing to fetch Mrs. Henderson and the midwife from town. Emma remained calm, breathing through the contractions, trusting her body. Mrs. Henderson arrived and took charge, shooing James out of the room. "You go wait with Miguel and Carlos," she ordered. "This is women's work." James looked torn, but Emma nodded. "I will be fine. Go." He kissed her forehead and left reluctantly. The labor was long, lasting through the day and into the night. Emma had never experienced such pain, but Mrs. Henderson and the midwife coached her through it, their voices steady and encouraging. Finally, as dawn broke on a new day, the baby came, a lusty cry filling the room. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the slippery, squalling infant on Emma's chest. Emma looked down at her son, this tiny, perfect person, and felt love so fierce it stole her breath. James burst into the room moments later, ignoring propriety. He stopped at the sight of Emma holding their baby, his face crumpling with emotion. "A son," Emma said, her voice shaky. "We have a son." James came to the bed, sat carefully, his large hand gently touching the baby's head. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for this gift." Tears streamed down his face unashamedly. They named him Thomas after Emma's father. Little Thomas Cordell was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up nights and filled their days with joy. Emma had never known exhaustion like this, but she had never known such fulfillment either. James was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried, singing lullabies in his deep voice. Miguel and Carlos doted on the baby, Carlos especially taking his role as honorary uncle seriously. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur. Emma marveled at each milestone, the first smile, the first tooth, the first time he sat up on his own. James was there for all of it, refusing to miss a moment despite the demands of the ranch. They worked it out, taking turns, supporting each other. Emma had never felt more like a team than when she and James navigated parenthood together. Thomas's second birthday brought a surprise. Emma found herself pregnant again, though this time she recognized the signs earlier. James was thrilled, hoping for a daughter this time. "A little girl with your eyes," he said, kissing Emma's stomach. Emma laughed. "Or another boy with your stubborn streak," James grinned. "I would be happy either way." And he was when their second son arrived the following spring, another healthy boy they named Samuel. The years rolled on, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The ranch prospered, James's hard work paying off. He expanded the herd, hired more help, built a new barn. Emma managed the growing household, raised their boys, and found time to start a small business selling her preserves and baked goods to the mercantile in redemption. She liked contributing, liked feeling useful beyond the home. Thomas and Samuel grew into fine boys, strong and kind like their father. Thomas had James's blue eyes and sense of responsibility. Samuel had Emma's quick wit and love of learning. They helped around the ranch as soon as they were able, learning to ride, to rope, to care for animals. James taught them with patience and pride, passing on everything he knew. When Thomas was 7 and Samuel 5, Emma found herself expecting again. This pregnancy was harder, her body older now, more tired. James worried constantly, but Emma remained calm. "I have done this twice before," she reminded him. "I know what I am doing." Still, when labor began, James was as anxious as he had been the first time. This time, though, he stayed in the room, holding Emma's hand, supporting her through each contraction. Their daughter arrived on a summer evening, small and perfect and loud. "A girl," Emma breathed, cradling her daughter close. James wept openly, kissing Emma, kissing the baby. "Our daughter," he said reverently. They named her Clara after James's mother. Clara was the light of their lives, a bright, curious child who wrapped her father around her tiny finger from day one. Thomas and Samuel adored their baby sister, protective and gentle with her. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. James and Emma worked side by side, partners in every sense. They faced droughts and hard winters, market crashes and personal losses. Miguel passed away when Thomas was 12, a peaceful death in his sleep that still left them heartbroken. Carlos stayed on, taking his father's place as foreman, eventually marrying a girl from town and starting his own family in a house James helped him build on the ranch property. Through it all, Emma and James's love deepened. The passion of their early days mellowed into something richer, a love built on respect and partnership and countless shared moments. They still sat on the porch most evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always content in each other's presence. Emma would look at James, his hair now streaked with gray, his face lined by years of sun and hard work, and think him the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one night many years after that first auction. "Taking a chance on me?" James looked at her, his blue eyes still sharp and clear. "Regret? Emma, you are the best decision I ever made. Everything good in my life started the day I met you." Emma smiled, leaning into his shoulder. "You saved me, you know, in every way a person can be saved." James kissed the top of her head. "We saved each other." Thomas eventually took over much of the ranch work, allowing James to slow down as his body aged. Samuel went to college, came back with a law degree, and set up practice in redemption. Clara married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who loved her fiercely. The house that had once seemed so quiet was filled with grandchildren, noise, and laughter during holidays and Sunday dinners. Emma and James grew old together, their love a constant through all the changes. Emma's hair turned silver, James's steps slowed, but they still held hands on the porch, still talked for hours, still laughed at private jokes decades old. The ranch, once James's dream, had become a family legacy, something to pass down to their children and grandchildren. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Thomas and his wife organized a party. The whole town came, it seemed, people of all ages gathering to celebrate the couple who had become legendary. Emma wore blue silk, a new dress but reminiscent of the one James had bought her so many years ago in Fort Worth. James wore his best suit, his eyes soft as he looked at his wife. During the speeches, Thomas stood up, his voice thick with emotion. "My parents have shown us what love really means. It is not just the big gestures, though my father buying my mother's entire life at auction was pretty impressive." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "It is the small things, the daily choices to be kind, to be patient, to put the other person first. It is building a life together, weathering storms together, celebrating victories together. They have given us an example to follow, and I hope I can love my wife half as well as my father loves my mother." Emma wiped tears from her eyes. James squeezed her hand. When it was their turn to speak, James stood, pulling Emma up with him. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "but I want to say this. 40 years ago, I walked into a town square and saw a woman losing everything. I thought I was helping her, but really, she saved me. She took a lonely cowboy and made him a husband, a father, a better man. Every day with Emma has been a gift. Every day I thank God for bringing me to that auction, for giving me the courage to approach her, for her saying yes to my crazy proposal." He turned to Emma, his eyes locked on hers. "I love you, Emma Cordell. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you past the end. You are my heart, my home, my everything." Emma could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she simply kissed him, there in front of everyone, a kiss that held 40 years of love and commitment and joy. The crowd erupted in applause, and Emma laughed against James's lips, happier than she had ever thought possible. More years passed, gentle and slow. James's health began to fail, his heart not as strong as it once was. Emma nursed him with the same devotion he had always shown her, refusing to let anyone else tend him. "We are in this together," she said when the children tried to insist on hiring help. "Until the very end." James held her hand through the difficult days, his grip still strong when it mattered. One spring morning, with wildflowers blooming outside and sunshine streaming through the bedroom window, James looked at Emma sitting beside his bed. "I am not afraid," he said softly. "I have had a good life, a blessed life. I got to love you, raise our children, build something meaningful. I am ready whenever it is time." Emma's tears fell freely. "I am not ready to let you go," James smiled, lifting his hand to cup her face. "You are the strongest person I know, Emma. You will be fine. You will have our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You will have all the memories we made. I will be waiting for you on the other side whenever you are ready to join me." But James rallied after that difficult week. His heart, stubborn as the rest of him, kept beating. He lived to see 2 more grandchildren born, to celebrate Thomas taking full ownership of the ranch, to walk Clara's daughter down the aisle when her father was thrown from a horse and broke his leg. He lived to sit on the porch with Emma on warm evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, holding the hand of the woman he had loved for nearly 50 years. When James finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep, Emma beside him. He was 78 years old, and he died on the ranch he had built, surrounded by family who loved him. The funeral was one of the largest Redemption had ever seen, people coming from across Texas to pay respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness, who had loved well and been loved in return. Emma grieved, but she did not crumble. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than she knew, capable of surviving loss. She remained on the ranch, supported by her children, finding comfort in the rhythms of the land James had loved. She spent her days with her grandchildren, telling them stories of their grandfather, making sure they knew the man he had been. She sat on the porch in the evenings, an empty chair beside her, talking to James as though he were still there. 5 years after James's death, Emma sat in that same spot, watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the plains. Lightning split the sky, thunder rumbled, and Emma felt at peace. She had lived a good life, better than she had dared dream that terrible day when her belongings were auctioned away. She had known true love, had built a family, had created a legacy. She closed her eyes, listening to the rain, and felt James's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. When Thomas found her the next morning, still sitting in her chair, he knew immediately that she was gone. Her face was peaceful, a slight smile on her lips as though she had seen something wonderful. They buried her beside James, under the cottonwood trees they had planted together a lifetime ago. The headstone read, "Emma Cordell, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, home at last." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations. Thomas's son eventually took over, then his grandson. The story of James and Emma became family legend, told to each new generation. The story of the cowboy who bought everything at auction and gave it all back, who saw a woman in need and offered her not just help but love, partnership, and a home. The story of a love that transformed 2 lives and created a legacy that lasted generations. In the house that James built and Emma made a home, her mother's china still sat on the shelves. The quilts her grandmother stitched still covered beds. Her father's books still lined the shelves. The belongings that had been sold and reclaimed remained, physical reminders of loss transformed into hope, of endings that became beginnings, of a cowboy and a woman who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful together. The ranch stood strong through droughts and storms, through changing times and new generations, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes, when everything seems lost, a stranger can appear and change your entire world. James Cordell had done exactly that for Emma Clarke, and in return, she had given him everything he had never known he needed. A home, a family, a love that lasted beyond death itself. And so their story ended not with an ending at all, but with continuation, with life flowing forward, with love multiplying through children and grandchildren, echoing through the years. The auction that had seemed like Emma's lowest moment became the beginning of her greatest adventure. The cowboy who bought her belongings to return them gave her so much more. He gave her himself, completely and without reservation, and she had done the same. In the end, that is what mattered. Not the belongings, not the ranch, not even the decades they shared, though all of those were precious. What mattered was the choice they made, standing in a hotel dining room 40 years earlier to take a chance on each other, to believe in the possibility of love even when logic said it was too fast, too unlikely. They had been right to take that chance. They had been right to trust what they felt. And they had spent the rest of their lives proving that love, real love, the kind that commits and perseveres and grows deeper with time, was the most powerful force in the world. It could redeem a loss, rebuild a life, and create something lasting and beautiful from the ashes of despair. That was the true legacy of James and Emma Cordell, and it lived on long after they were gone.